stock closed about 0.5% on the benchmark indices. The mid-caps continue with their outperformance. So that index is higher by 150 points. The markets were a bit worried. What could be the announcement coming in from the Prime Minister? Will we see a demonetization part 2, which is why immediately once the news was out that the Prime Minister will be making an announcement, we saw a sell-off. But now there is some relief that this is actually to do with India becoming a space superpower. Let's focus on the stocks which are in the news today. GMR Infrastructure is on our radar. Tata Group has made a strategic investment in the company's airport business. It has tied up with GIC and SSG Capital to buy a 45% stake in GMR Airports for 8,000 crore rupees. Nisha is here with the details and the key takeaways from the management. Nisha?
Transaction, and the big takeaway from this is that Tata is betting big on GMR Airports and therefore has bought a 20% equity stake in the company. So it's a consortium led by Tata. Part of it is GIC with 15% stake and also SSG Capital with 10% stake. So in total 45% stake being bought for 8,000 crore rupees. Out of this 8,000 crores, 1,000 crores will be as part of infusion into GMR Airports, and the rest 7,000 crore rupees will be coming in GMR Infra. But the management has told us that the entire 8,000 crore rupees will be used for paring down debt from the current around 20,000 crore rupees to now being reduced to 12,000 crore rupees, and which will also mean that the finance charges for GMR Infra will reduce to almost half. Another important aspect will be the valuations. The deal has been struck at 18,000 crore rupees of equity valuation, which is lower than 21,000 crore rupees, in which the private equity settlement had happened in GMR Infra. Now, the company is stating that an earn-out valuation of above 22,000 crore rupees is what they are expecting, and that will be realized over time. And with that, the 54% which is being owned by GMR Infra through this, after this transaction in GMR Airports, could be increased to 62%. So that will be very important.
Nisha, we'll come back to you in a minute. We have just to analyze this announcement that has come from the PMO, from the Prime Minister of India, having acquired advanced powers in space to bring down a satellite. We have Professor Brahmachelani, the professor at Center for Policy Research, joining us. Professor Chelani, if you can explain this to us, what exactly does this mean in terms of space prowess?
Space wars have long been themes of Hollywood movies. Yes. But space wars are becoming a reality because if you look at the major powers like the United States, Russia, and China, they either have operational anti-satellite weapons or they are developing such weapons for deployment. And therefore, in a conflict that involves India and China, India's electronic infrastructure, including its space-based capabilities, would be very vulnerable to an attack by China. And therefore, developing counter-space capabilities is essential for deterrence. And therefore, today's announcement that India has successfully killed a low-orbiting satellite with a anti-satellite weapon, that development is very significant.
So it's more as a deterrence capability, not a defense of our satellites, right?
It's deterrent because without a deterrence, the enemy will be tempted to strike first and to knock out all your space-based platforms, especially satellites, and that would leave India naked in a military sense. And therefore, developing this kind of capability sends a deterrent message to the enemy that if it were to attack India, attack India's space-based platforms, that India would in return the enemy's space-based platforms too.
Okay, so strong messaging as well coming in from India about its space defense capabilities. Mr. Jilani, there was an article made by the DRDO chief, and this was about 6 years ago, where he said that we can show our anti-satellite capability if the government gives its nod. If you could tell us the significance of Prime Minister Modi himself making the announcement. What has been the role of the government in this?
Well, I'm glad you asked that question because we had taken the moral high ground, as we often do in India on various issues. The previous government had been reluctant to give the go-ahead to the DRDO to operationally demonstrate India's asset capability, asset meaning anti-satellite capability. Now, this government, led by Prime Minister Modi, gave the go-ahead to the DRDO, and therefore now we're seeing the fruit of that capability in terms of a demonstrated kill.
Does this mean that there are more allied capabilities that ISRO would have developed?
Well, I'm sure there are some capabilities that that DRDO would not like to make public or even signal in public, but often it depends on the government in office, whether it's willing to give the go-ahead to the Defense Research and Development Organization or its affiliated agencies to test out those capabilities. Now, in this case, asset capabilities, that is, anti-satellite capabilities, have already been demonstrated by China, Russia, and the United States, and China being an adversary of India, with which we have fought a war, and conflict with China is always a probability that our defense planners have to reckon with. Given China's capability in anti-satellite warfare, it had become essential for India to develop a counter to China's asset capability. And today's kill of a low-orbiting satellite through an asset weapon sends a very powerful message to China in particular, because this technology has no relevance to Pakistan. Pakistan doesn't have this capability and is not seeking to develop such a capability.
Fair enough. Does this improve India's standing in the international sweepstakes? I mean, you become a slightly more respected power, so it's not just vis-a-vis China, but a generally higher recognition for India's capabilities?
Absolutely. But India has demonstrated its space capabilities both in the civilian sphere by sending a mission to the Mars successfully, and also in the military sphere. And this anti-satellite kill is a demonstration of India's military-relevant space capability.
Fair point. Thank you very much, Professor Chelani, for putting that into perspective. We were a bit groping in the dark as to what exactly the significance is, but it is a major deterrence capability that India has now achieved, especially because China has the capability to destroy our satellites, and now India has an equal capability, and therefore, hopefully, that's a big deterrence.
And we joined that elite list because up until now, only US, China, as well as Russia have demonstrated their ASAT capability, and now India becomes the 4th country to do that. We'll slip into a very short break on that note. When we come back, as always, it will be a chat in the commodity space. Renisha Chenani of Monarch Net Worth Capital joins in next.